Hi everyone, it's Talia from Zart Art, and today we're going to be decorating a wooden photo frame. So here is an example of the project that we'll be creating today. So we'll be using a wooden frame and drawing inspiration from an artist to create the design for our frame. So for this activity, you can go at it in a few different ways. First, you can have a think about what photo you want to display in your frame and then work on the design for the frame from that photo. So for example, this frame here, we used a beach scene as our source of inspiration for the frame around it. So you can see we've used our paint markers, which are just over here. So we used our paint markers to create a base color for the frame, and then we've used some Magiclay, so our candy colors of Magiclay here, to add a little bit of a 3D element to the frame, and then we've just enhanced our design a little bit more with some of our foam glitter shapes. So there's a lot of different elements going on for this design, but we're going to start off with thinking about what we want to use in our frame. So for my design, I'm going to pick a person. So this could be a person that you know, it could be yourself, or it could be a scene that you had a memory of, or an area that you love visiting, like a park. So for my little frame, we are going to work with this photo. Little girl with a bunny. So this could be yourself, this could be your brother, sister, or you could choose your parents to display in your frame. But for this particular project, we're going to think about what kind of artists, what kind of things this person might like that is being presented in the frame. So for my frame, we've got the girl with the bunny. Bunnies, if there's one thing I know about bunnies, they've got long ears, and they also like grass and bugs and plants. So we're going to create a design similar to this, inspired by the artist Flora Waycott. So this is an example of some of Flora's work here. So you can see very heavily inspired by nature, flowers, leaves, insects. So we're going to incorporate that all into the design for our frame. So to begin, we're going to start with a layer of color using our paint markers. So when you're using your paint markers, it's always good to have just a spare piece of paper close by, just so you can make sure that the ink is flowing really nicely out of that marker. You can give it a pump to get that paint flowing a little bit better. So I'm going to choose a lighter color for my frame. So thinking about the person in your frame, what might their favorite colors be? Use that as a bit of a source of inspiration. So I'm simply going to use my paint marker and just lay a flat area of color down on my frame. Okay, so I've got the base coat of my frame. So just a quick note, you can decorate both sides of your frame, so that can look quite nice, especially if you're displaying your finished piece in the easel, like this one here, but because it will take a little while to complete both sides and it is a very similar process, I'm just going to decorate one side on video today, but you can use your paint markers on the other side in layers as well. Same techniques as I'm showing you here. So you might want to wait a few minutes just for your paint marker to dry. This one's nearly there, but you can see that's still a little bit wet. So waiting about 5 minutes just for it all to completely dry is best. But the next step, I'm going to add some more of those smaller features. So some of these flowers here, you can see I've got a bit of a layering thing happening where I've done the leaves first, then I've done the larger shapes of the flowers, and then the smaller shapes inside the flowers to get some of that really nice detail. So once I've let this dry for a couple of minutes, I'm going to go on to some of these more leafy shapes, vine shapes, which will sit in the background of my frame in this section. You could also color in the inside of the frame if you wanted to, but that will be covered once you put a photo in there. So not necessary, but it can be an option. If you change your photo quite often, then you might want to do that as well. Okay, so now I've just done that first layer of detail, so some of the paint is still a little bit wet, so it's good to wait before you go over the top of one section for that section to completely dry. Now just a quick note is to figure out which way your frame is sitting. So you'll have a piece of paper which is measured precisely to fit into the frame, so that's just 200 GSM cartridge paper. So the card should be 115 millimeters by 70 millimeters, and that will fit perfectly into your frame. And that's how you figure out whether the top of the frame is at the top or at the bottom. So you can slot it from the bottom, but if you want to have your picture slotted from the top, just be aware of the orientation of your frame, and we'll use that piece of paper later to measure out the photo and stick it to it. So we're just going to wait a couple of minutes and then work over the top of this section. We'll be doing our larger flowers, and then over the top of that, just the smaller details inside the flower. So good to wait a few minutes when using the paint markers, just so the colors don't bleed into each other. Okay, so now we've got the main design on our frame that is all completed in paint markers. Now what we're going to do is use our Magic Clay and create more of a 3D element. So looking again at Flora Waycott's designs, we've got her insects here. We've also got flowers, so we can do a combination of flowers and insects that will stand up on the frame. So you can see here the insects that I've created in Magic Clay have a little bit of a 3D element. So you can go even more 3D like I have with this frame, or keep it a little bit more flat if you so desire. But what I'm going to do is use our candy coloured Magic Clay, and I'm going to work directly onto the frame by pressing the Magic Clay on and then creating my design from there. What you could do alternatively is create your design with the Magic Clay separately, let it dry, and then use something like a super tack or a PVA to glue on your little pieces to the frame, depending on which way you want to work and if you do have glue available, but either of those methods will work fine. So for my first little design, I'm going to create an insect. So the Magic Clay is very soft, very malleable. And again, remember which way your frame sits. So if you've been shifting your frame around, get your piece of cartridge paper that is cut to size and make sure that that goes in the slot. So we know that this is the top of my frame. So I'll have some of my insects facing different directions. So it doesn't really matter too much which way they're facing, but some of your designs might make a difference in that sense. So you can gently press your little molded creature or whatever you're creating onto the frame, and because Magic Clay has an adhesive in it, it should stick by itself. Also make sure that you seal your Magic Clay when you're done using it so it doesn't dry out. So now I'm just going to mold straight onto the frame my little insects. Okay, so now I've got some of my little magic clay insects on my frame. You can fill up the frame as much or as little as you want, but I'm going to add a little bit more sparkle and fun with our glitter shapes. So with your glitter shapes, again, you can think about your design, what you're creating, which shapes work best with what you've got in your frame. So I'm gonna have a little bit of a play. There are some floral shapes around which I'll add onto my frame, and I might add a little bit of magic clay to it as well to just add some more of that texture and more of that detail and make all of the elements in my frame really link together. Okay, so now I've finished the design for my frame. Now the last step is just to insert your picture into your frame design. So we've got our picture here, so it's worthwhile making sure your picture at least roughly fits the measurement, so you can do that on the computer. Now with the piece of cartridge, I'm just going to trace around so we know that that will fit onto the piece of paper, and then I'll cut out the photo and stick it on to the already cut out piece of paper so we know that that all fits. Now, don't be too concerned if your photo doesn't completely fit on the page, because we are working in the frame. Some of that will be cut off when you do insert it in. So it won't exactly be the whole image shown in the frame if you're working to the exact measurements of your paper. Now we'll make sure that it does fit into the frame. You might have to trim off the edges if it is a little tight. And you might have to trim the bottom or the top, but that fits quite well. So I'm quite happy with how that's sitting. But if your image isn't placed in the exact right spot, you can trim the edges. So for example, if the photo was sitting a little bit high, you can just trim off the bottom of your photo to make it fit a little bit better. But that piece of paper is a good guide to have to see where your photo fits. So now we've got our finished frame, which can sit on the easel, which will make a really lovely display for your house. So this is a really fun activity where you can focus on different themes. You can have a really deep think about what kind of photo you want presented in the frame and how the decoration of the frame will impact the way that photo might be read. You can base your work off different artists or different themes such as the ocean, nature, or other things that the subject in your actual picture might enjoy. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you next time.